I'm gonna tell you this right now, the theme to Don to Don Season 1 hits way harder than Season 2. Okay, so I've made a little bit of content on the Ursa Cine 12K. I've borrowed it a couple times. I finally bought one for myself. I've done some live streams, worked on a couple of projects as well, and I still think that this is going to be the best camera that I'm going to have for a fairly long time in terms of the category of camera that it is. I'm not buying an Alexa Mini LF anytime in my lifetime. But I am gonna say is that after all the hype is down, after you have the post-camera clarity, there's a couple of quirks of this camera that you might not like. And in today's video, I'm gonna tell you what the YouTubers won't tell you. See, that sounds a little bit ridiculous, but I am gonna go over a couple of quirks of the Ursa Cine 12K you might find along the way. Some might be deal breakers and some might just be some nuanced stuff that happens whenever you buy any camera of any kind. We'll get there. First things first, if you were going to buy a 12K camera that could downsample to 8K, 4K, whatever, it has all the Ks, it's gonna use a lot of battery life. I'm just gonna tell you that right out the gate. The Ursa Cine 12K is one of the most battery hungry cameras I've ever worked with. But one of the things I wanna tell you when you're getting some of these bigger cinema cameras is that you probably don't wanna just use one battery for the entire day. Again, this camera is not going to be an FX3 or an S1 II or anything like that. It's gonna draw a lot of power because you're gonna get a lot out of it. But I will say, you're gonna need like 4 batteries. Currently, right now, I have a 150 watt hour battery, a 98 watt hour battery, and I have a shark fin that I can run them both at the same time. And I could probably say on a full day, I'm probably gonna need 2 more of those core SWS batteries in order to make sure that not only have the battery life, but also when you're using the 28 volt batteries or 26 volt, you'll be able to get all the frame rates. Now, speaking of all of the frame rates, you're gonna take up a lot of memory as well. And if you wanna save a little bit of money on getting the full kit on the Ursa Cine 12K LF, you can always go for the body only, like what I did, because it does come with a CF Express B type module. Now, this also is going to have a couple of caveats as well, because you're gonna have to be very careful with the CF Express cards that you're going to be using. Now you can go on the Blackmagic website and you can try out different combinations and different frame rates to find out how much read and write speed that you're going to need in your cards in order to make things happen. However, I wanna keep in mind that when you're working with a particular CF Express Type B card or any card at all, that write speed that's gonna be in the front is going to be its top end. For example, if I buy a card, it'll tell me how much horsepower it is, but it's not necessarily gonna tell me the speed limit when I'm getting from my house to getting to work. One of the things you're gonna have to look for is gonna be sustained write speed. That's gonna be a speed that it's gonna be able to maintain, which kind of gives you sort of a guarantee that that's gonna be the speed that you could operate at without dropping any frames. Now, I do have some of the older version Angelbird cards, which has about a 1785 write speed with a sustained 800, which will get me the majority of the things that I usually shoot, but you're gonna need higher capacity, faster cards if you wanna get all the way to that 12K 80 frames a second that you can get on the Ursa Cine 12K LF. Now, this video is going to be sponsored by ProGrade. We actually did use some of their cards while we were shooting the 48-hour film challenge out in Ohio just last week. And it actually came in clutch because I was able to use these higher capacity, higher speed writing cards and not have to worry about dropping frames at any of the frame rates or the resolutions that we were going to use. Now, because we were working on a film and shooting it in 48 hours, one of the roadblocks you might come into contact with is when you want to get a high frame rate shot, but your cards aren't fast enough to do that. There's a little bit of a caveat we'll talk about a little bit later, but the ProGrade cards were not only great in being able to have higher write capacities, but also it's sustained as well, was double what my original Angelbird cards were. Now you can get Angelbird cards that have that capacity as well. However, ProGrade was nice enough to help support our film and make sure that we got the things that we needed to get done, and as well as the cards are pretty nice and they're super fast as well, and who doesn't like a little bit more memory in their camera? Special shout out to ProGrade for actually sponsoring this video, helping us out with the 48-hour film project, but let's get back in. Another quirk that I noticed while I was on set was that the fact that you can get 3 monitors on the Ursa Cine 12K LF, except there's a bit of a color matching issue between the Pixis monitor that I plugged in through the USB port and the monitor that's on the camera itself. Now, this can be solved with a simple calibration. I just went under the assumption that when I buy a Blackmagic monitor, it would match up to the other stuff, which also just kind of sounds like user error. Yeah, that's user error, but yeah, the monitors don't match up the first time that you use them. You might have to do a calibration. Another thing that I mentioned behind the scenes of actually doing that 48-hour film was actually recording to dual card slots. Now, technically speaking, the Ursa Cine 12K can record to 2 different card slots at the same time. However, the way that it does it is just a little bit weird and it's gonna freak you out the first time. Now, when we're talking about read speeds and all the other stuff and be able to get all the frame rates and all the other stuff on the Ursa Cine 12K, if your first card isn't fast enough, say you have 2 cards that are 800, you're gonna be able to record to 2 speeds where you could actually add those 2 together to make the total 1600. Or whatever the fastest one is, it'll kind of double it up. Essentially just use the same cards. But anyway, basically what's gonna end up happening is when you are recording to 2 cards at the same time, you'll be able to get the extra read speed, but the caveat is that when you play back, you're only gonna see the odd numbers of the frames because it's actually writing them to 2 separate cards at the same time, kind of like how a RAID drive works. However, when you are playing things back, you'll run into a little bit of issues because it is only gonna play one of those cards at the same time, so you're only getting every other frame, which could freak you out the first time if you're not used to it. So on one end, you're gonna be able to record a lot of things. If you wanna be able to get all the frame rates and all the data rates that you're gonna get on there, you could merge the 2 cards together and it'll work just fine. However, on the flip side, if you're trying to play that back on set, you might freak yourself out the first time. I'd also like to add, there's no 3.5mm jack on the body itself on the Ursa Cine 12K LF. I mean, there wasn't one on the FX6, and at least there's XLRs both on the body itself, so I can't really complain over there, and also you can just kind of adapt one into the other. But if you are working with a 3.5mm microphone, you're not gonna be able to do it on here unless you get some sort of adapter cable. Now, another thing that you might figure out the hard way is that when you actually open the box for the Ursa Cine 12K LF, especially when you get the body only, it literally does not come with anything. And by like does not come with anything, I mean it truly does not come with anything. I did a live stream where I unboxed this for everyone to see so we could set this guy up and get a couple of clips on it. And once I opened the box, it literally just has the body itself. When they say body only, they're not kidding. You get a DaVinci Resolve licensing key so you can edit all the footage that you're gonna get off your new Ursa Cine 12K, but you don't get the power cable in order to plug the camera in to get clips in the first place, which is a little bit weird, and it does cost you like 200 bucks to get that cable. But I guess if you're trying to save a lot of money on this kit, they truly are not messing around when they mean you're only getting the body. Now that kind of goes into the next thing I'm gonna say is that when you're buying a larger camera, everything is gonna be a bit more expensive. Your cages are gonna be a bit more expensive and also harder to find. Still haven't found a cage that I like just yet. But also getting things like the battery plate, because you can't get a battery plate on this guy, you have to buy it separately. Getting the larger batteries and everything else is just gonna get more pricey. Even things like support for this. You can't run this on a regular slider. You'd have to use things like a Dana dolly or things like an easy rig are things that you're going to encounter, especially when you want to get the necessary accessories to shoot the same way you would on an Ursa Cine 12K as you would maybe on like an FX3. But once again, these 2 cameras are not the same. The Ursa Cine and the FX3, they're not the same camera. So I found another quirk with the Ursa Cine 12K, and this has to do a lot if you're gonna use any of the DJI Focus products like the Focus Pro or the Focus motor on its own. And in this scenario, if I'm gonna pull focus, I would just hook up a motor and use this guy, and it has to do with the USB ports on the camera itself. So right now, this is plugged into the USB port. It works the same as plugged into this port, and even on the monitor port. But if you take a look at this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to calibrate my Focus Pro motor. I'm gonna let it calibrate for a little bit and then just keep your eye on this motor. I'll calibrate it up like it normally is, and then it shuts off. Now this happens when you run the power on the actual camera body itself. However, if I plug this into another USB device, it doesn't seem to happen. So I'm just gonna do this in the next shot. So I'm gonna run this over to a MPF battery. This is by Small Rig, and then my motor is on again. And then once I calibrate, I'll just kind of set this guy up real quick. Let this guy calibrate a little bit. Yeah, and now we're all fine. Now I can rotate and pull focus however I'd like. So basically you gotta have this hooked up to a more powerful source. Just so happens that the USB ports might not put the right amount of power into this guy, which is weird because it works on the Pixis monitor. But I wanna shoot more stuff on this thing, and also I'm rebuilding a little bit of a reel for a very particular reason, which we'll talk about probably in another video. And since you guys are already subscribed, I hope you guys are, I'll see you in the next one. Oh, no, actually, no. I want to shout out our channel members as well. If you guys don't know this, I do have channel members. You guys can pick whichever tier you want to. There's anything from support tier all the way into getting monthly footage dumps so you can play with some of the footage that you see in some of these videos. I don't really have a link in the description. I don't know how to do that. So if you go to my channel page, you can figure it out. But now, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.